Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Formula One iceberg of controversies and conspiracies. I'm not explaining what an iceberg is. You probably know what an iceberg is in these kind of videos. If you don't know, I don't know, give it a Google or something. But we're just jumping straight into this shit. And right away, we're going to be going into.
Oh, out goes Schumacher. The German is out of the Australian Grand Prix.
So, the year is 1994. We're in Australia. We're in Adelaide. Michael Schumacher has had kind of an interesting year. He won a lot, then he got disqualified from a race, and then some other kind of stuff happened. Then you got Damon Hill. Didn't have the most stellar year, but then he started pulling it back the last half. So now we're coming into Adelaide. There's a 1 point difference. Schumacher's in the lead. This is a big race right here, folks. They're going into it. They get off the line. They start driving. Michael Schumacher gets the lead. They're driving around. They're doing their laps. Lap 35. Schumacher makes a little mistake, crashes, hits a wall a little bit. Tries to get back on the track. Damon Hill, he's right behind him. He smells blood. He's ready. He's going for it. Michael Schumacher tries going in for the next corner, but Damon Hill was there. Their cars touch. Schumacher's car almost flips, but then it ends up just going off into the wall. And then Damon Hill, one of the little wishbone arms on his car, got damaged in the crash. So they had to retire his car. So now they're both out of the race. And that kind of means that Michael Schumacher wins. So that's the story of how Michael Schumacher won his first F1 title. Just kind of a neat little story to wrap it all up, you know? The whole season, everything happening, that's how he wins it. So, there you go.
To any of them, this is the opportunity that Senna's looking for, and he's going through. Ouch! Oh my goodness, this is fantastic!
Next, we are doing the Suzuka 1989 and 1990 controversies. So in 1989, it's a big race. Prost is in P1, Senna is in P2. Whoever wins this race wins the championship. It's pretty late in the race. It's lap. Prost is in the lead. Senna's coming up behind him. They're both going into a chicane. Prost, from what it looks like to me, Prost takes the slightly more aggressive racing line to try to cut off Senna. But Senna, he doesn't allow himself to get cut off. He doesn't touch those brakes. He goes right into it. So, they crash. Prost, his car is out of the race. Senna is able to get back into the race. He's able to keep racing. He's able to regain first place after all the shenanigans with the crash. And he was able to, quote-unquote, win the race. But the FISA president said he got disqualified because he missed the chicane following the collision, which is kind of silly because he didn't really gain a competitive or unfair advantage from doing that. So, Prost ends up winning the championship that year, and he gets the driver's trophy. But things only got worse for Ayrton Senna after that. Not only did
Senna
he get taken out of the race, but he was also thrown another $100,000 fine and suspended for 6 months for being a quote-unquote dangerous driver. Wow. That's 1989 Suzuka. That's what happened. It's all just a part of the history books now. Okay, boom. Now we're doing 1990 Suzuka. This one, similar but different. Ayrton Senna qualifies P1. Prost qualifies P2. The pole position side of the track, it's a little dirty. So Ayrton Senna goes to the stewards and he says, hey, could we switch pole to the other side so that I'm not on the dirty side? And at first they said, sure, makes sense. But then they said, no, we don't like that. So Senna has to start. He's starting first, but he's starting on a dirtier side of the track. Way less grip. Prost, P2. Cleaner side of the track, obviously. Race starts. 3, 2, 1. Boom. They go off. They start driving. Prost, being on the cleaner side of the track, obviously gains the lead. He gets into first. But because this is the 15th out of the 16th race, they both crash. Alain Prost, there's no way that he'll be able to make up the point difference for the last race. So Ayrton Senna wins on the crash. Well, he doesn't win the race. He wins the Drivers' Championship based on the crash. He's obviously pretty happy now because last year he got it stolen from him, he got robbed, and then the year after, he gets it back. You could argue other forms of robberies on other sides. It ends up just being a split 1-1 for the 2 years. Both of them win drivers' trophies. Everybody's kind of happy, I think. Next, we are talking about the Racing Point brake duct controversy. This one happened in 2020. Pretty much, Racing Point had copied the Mercedes car very, very well. They got every little detail, all sorts of little things. They did a pretty darn good job of copying that car. And at the time, that was kind of, sort of, slightly legal. You could kind of copy certain parts, but you weren't technically allowed to copy other parts, if not all parts. And one of the parts that they did copy, that they shouldn't have been allowed to copy, were the brake ducts. And Renault decided to start an appeal against the team, and the appeal went through, and Racing Point lost 15 Constructors' Championship points, unfortunately. And that's pretty much all there is to it. You could look a little bit more into the super specific technical workarounds of how and why the brake ducts work and stuff like that, but that's a little complicated. I'm not looking that deep into this. I'll pass. Next, we are talking about the Renault brake bias controversy. This happened 2019 out in Japan, and what had happened is the Renault car had the computer adjust the brake bias in the car depending on how far you were in the lap, so that the driver had to do less. So instead of the driver having to press 10, 20 buttons in a lap, now they're pressing 5, 6, 7, something like that. I'm just kind of making up numbers. But the idea was that it's supposed to take the load off of the driver. Racing Point decided to protest their car, and they got disqualified from the Japanese Grand Prix because it was technically a illegal driver aid. Again, they argued that it reduced the driver workload without enhancing the performance of the car, disproportionate to any benefits the driver derived. But they still got in trouble. And that's that. They didn't argue. They kind of just, they took it, really. They didn't want to fight too hard for it. And in total, that's the Renault brake bias controversy.
Valtteri, it's James.
I had no idea that there was any sort of controversy involving that, but then I just decided to give it a quick Google. I no shit found this on Urban Dictionary. This is a exact quote from the Urban Dictionary definition of this phrase, I guess you'd say. Mercedes-Benz AMG F1 driver Valtteri Bottas is being told by the team's race strategist James Vowles to let his teammate Lewis Hamilton to take the lead of the 2018 Russian Grand Prix to increase the advantage in the championship standing by 3 points. This movement became very controversial as Bottas was seen as robbed a race win, in spite of his effort putting himself on pole position during qualifying on Saturday by team orders, benefiting Lewis Hamilton. At the end of the season, Bottas was the first Mercedes driver who didn't win a single race since Michael Schumacher in 2012. Background aside, numbers of memes were created from these controversial decisions involving team orders. Shut up, cat. Background aside, numbers of memes were created from these controversial decisions of team orders. Yeah, I didn't expect such a well-worded read on Urban Dictionary. And before this, I didn't know that there was any specific controversy involved with this. I thought it was just kind of a meme that you'd heard a couple times. Yeah, you'll learn something new every day. And I guess there actually is a controversy involving that phrase, and it wasn't just thrown in there for the meme. So, that's kind of interesting, I think.
Parts, they're going to help kick this thing off. All right, guys, ready? In 3, 2, 1.
Drivers, start your engines! Let's go, Brandon!
Okay, next we are talking about the 2005 US Grand Prix. This one, pretty famous, pretty controversial. You can find way more in-depth information about this one very, very easily. Everyone's coming to race in the US of A. At the time, there were 7 teams that were supplied by Michelin, 3 teams that were supplied by Bridgestone. It was a different time. Things were weird back then, having different tire manufacturers. And also, back in the day, they wanted to get rid of pit stops for tires, and they wanted to make very hard tires that lasted the entire race, instead of having pit stops where the tires were changed out. You only got one set your entire race. Now, the US Grand Prix out in Indianapolis, it's a slightly unique track. It had a very banked corner that no other tracks had that F1 was used to, and there wasn't proper data simulation behind that. The track was diamond groove cut laterally, which meant, had diamond grinding on a longitudinal The track had diamond grooving going the long way with the cars, and that put a very unique stress load between the corner and the diamond grinding all together, corner after corner, lap after lap. The Michelin tires, they couldn't handle it. That was too much of a load for them. A bunch of politics, a bunch of shenanigans later, only 3 teams were allowed to race, and it was a 6-car race, which is kind of silly. A lot of shenanigans. A lot of unhappy fans. That's kind of a rare one that we haven't heard yet. And overall, I think you could also say an unhappy everybody. And I think we could put that one at that. Next, we are talking about the Haas floor. This happened back in 2018 out in Italy. It's kind of, the technical explanation of this is a little weird, but the best way I could explain it is that the barge board on the side of the car with the little winglets can only be attached to the car so far forward. There has to be a little bit of a gap before you can start attaching stuff. Haas really pushed it to the limit of starting to attach stuff. They got 6th place out in Italy. They were feeling pretty good, but Renault protested it after the race, and it was deemed that the floor was technically illegal. Haas did in fact get disqualified from the Italian GP. Should Haas gotten disqualified from this event? Should it have been a little bit more minor of a thing? I'm not exactly sure. I mean, they did technically break the rules, I guess. So I mean, maybe something like that deems more of a bigger slap on the wrist, more of a chopping off a fingertip or something, I guess. At the end of the day, Haas was taken out. They lost the points. Not happy campers. That's the Haas floor controversy, as it is really. Next, we go into the Mercedes dual axis system. They noticed in Lewis Hamilton's car that he was not only able to turn left and right like your standard car, he was able to push the wheel in and out to adjust the toe of the angle on the front tires. Nobody was exactly sure what this did. I don't even know if they still exactly know what it does. I think it's illegal now, so I don't even think they allowed it in 2021. But it did something. Probably with some little extra grip somewhere, somehow. Maybe they were just letting him feel it out and kind of, do his thing. They were the first people to do that innovative technology in Formula 1 or in a car overall, I guess. Yeah, that's all there is really to DOS. That was kind of it's a pretty small one, They only had it for maybe a year or two.
I was just flexing on my ex, bitch.
Next, we go to the Flexi-wing controversy. Pretty much, this involves the rear wing when you're going full speed on the straight, starting to dip down a little bit. Try to give it a little extra bendy bit so it bends, doesn't create as much drag. They're able to go get a couple extra fucking miles an hour out of their car. They're always pushing for everything here. People were not happy with it again, and there was a lot of arguments, and if there's a lot of legality arguments, if these were allowed or not, and if they were bad or wrong or good or not, all that kind of stuff. There's still, I think they're illegal, but they're always trying to find a way to get a little edge, and that was just one of the weird little ways that they tried to find an edge, was by getting that wang to drop a little bit,
This is a Ferrari?
Alright, first we start off with the Ferrari veto. This one's actually kind of interesting. I had no idea about this until I did some reading on it. Okay, so as it goes with the Ferrari veto, apparently they were allowed the right to veto against the FIA's rules because they're the only team that's been around since the first year and the only team that is still currently around. For some reason that gives them a little extra bonus, a little extra, little handout, I guess you could call it. A lot of people disagree with this, obviously, and there's a multitude of reasons why. Even Jean Todt, the Ferrari's one of their old employees who became one of the FIA guys, even he's against it, which you'd think, being a Ferrari guy, you'd think that it would be the opposite. He's a pretty cool guy, I guess. The quote that we get from Jean Todt is that Enzo Ferrari was the founder. He was very isolated in Maranello compared to all the other British teams. He was alone, and you will remember in the 1980s, Ferrari was the only full car manufacturer of engine and chassis. He was facing private teams like Williams, Lotus, and McLaren that were all using the same engine. If I remember, it was the Ford Cosworth engine. So he got that veto in his discussion to implement blah, 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 blah. He got the veto because of being an OG. Found an article that I thought was pretty funny that was on the website of scuderiafans.com, and it was about that Ferrari has the right of veto and it's not a privilege. And they were arguing about how Honda can just kind of come in and go, but because Ferrari's an OG, that means that they're allowed to stay in and get that veto. We're going to stay with Ferrari, but we're going to talk about the Ferrari 2019 engine. Ferrari came out in 2019. They had a pretty fast car. People are like, wow, that's a pretty fast car. Ferrari was like, thanks. Put a lot of love into this car, But people were so sketched out by how fast their car was that they started looking into how Ferrari might be potentially cheating to be gaining this advantage. And teams like Red Bull put together documents of, hey, look at this little thing, this hypothetical idea of how I could potentially cheat. Is this technically legal or not? And that started the whole fuel flow gate, because it was suspected that Ferrari was able to, it's slightly complicated, but they measure how much fuel goes into the engine. They were thinking that Ferrari might push a little bit more fuel than is needed past the meter, have a little tank on the side that holds on fuel past the meter, and then when the engine needs it, pulls that fuel out of that little compartment, and you get the extra speed. And after all this the Red Bull fuel flow gate documents came out, Ferrari's engine immediately became really bad that year. It's kind of suspected that they were cheating, but when they had to talk to the FIA, they were allowed make it all just go away and make it all not public, and nobody had to hear or know anything. We all pretty much know that Ferrari tried to cheat, but we can't get an absolute confirmation on it, and it's kind of weird, kind of silly, but Ferrari probably cheated back in 2019. So that's the fuel flow gate shenanigans.
4 seconds, 3, 2, and 1, and I don't think they've made it.
Come on, guys.
This is another kind of quick, kind of simple one. We're at Monza in 2019. It's Q3, last couple minutes of qualifying, and everybody's just sitting in the paddock waiting. Everybody's waiting for the first guy to come out so that other people can be behind them and they can get the slipstream. But nobody's going first. Everybody's waiting on everybody. Well, somebody's got to go first. We got to do this eventually. Finally, they all get out. They all kind of get on the track, but they're all kind of going slow. They're all trying to make each other get in front of each other, trying to, they're just playing little dumb little games. And then they don't realize how little of time they have left in the qualifying session. And they only really realize at the last second that if they don't just go, they're not going to be able to put in their proper lap. And then no one's able to go in, and no one's able to put in their proper lap. And it just kind of looked like a mess. It was just kind of silly, honestly. The best word to describe it was just kind of silly. There's nothing else really to it. It was just a silly little qualifying event. Something won't happen again. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it. Yeah, I don't know. There's nothing else really to that one.
George Russell. P2.
Come on! Yes! Yes!
Next, for another quickie, just to kind of get out of the way, we're going with the 2021 Belgian Grand Prix. This one's pretty recent. If you follow Formula 1, you already probably know what happened here. We'll start with qualifying. It's already super wet. Conditions slightly sketchy, not the sketchiest ever, but pretty sketchy. Lando Norris crashes on El Rouge. Event gets red flagged for a bit, comes back on. George Russell ends up getting P2 in a Williams, which was beyond crazy. Then we get into the race. Well, of what race there really was, because they do 2 laps behind a safety car. It's deemed that the conditions are too sketchy and they have to end the event after 2 laps, and there was no racing. But because there was technically 2 laps of racing, some points were able to be handed out. And Nikita Mazepin got fastest lap in a Haas, which doesn't really count because of obvious circumstances. But I think technically on his record, he'll always have at least one fastest lap of a race. And it's going to be the Belgium Grand Prix 2021. But other than that, there wasn't that much to that event. It was just sad with that track being very popular, and we didn't get to see a race on it this year, which was kind of sad. Shit happens. It was a very wild year, and this was just one of the wild waves that we went through at some point on the crazy roller coaster that was the 2021 year.
We went to car racing.
Next, just to bang another sort of fresh wound off, we're going to go with the 2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Boy, this one had a lot. I mean, to start off, lap 1, you had the turn incident with Max and Lewis. Lewis going off track, getting to keep the position. You had Perez defending, which was incredible racing. So much fun to watch. We then get Latifi crashing his car out of the race. Safety car comes out. Everybody's like, wow, damn, we're going to end on a safety car? Well, GG, that sucks. But then, it looks like that's not going to happen. There's a bunch of cars in between them, all the lapped cars, and they're able to go through. They get to sneak out at the last lap, so now it's Max right behind Lewis. The safety car comes in, and we get one final lap of racing. Max is on better tires, and I think you can guess what happens next.
Michael, this isn't right. Michael, ahead, Toto.
You need to reinstate the lap before. That's not right.
Toto?
Yes.
It's called a motor race, okay?
Sorry?
Magnificent.
Oh, right. Now we're going to be talking about pretty fun little controversy. The rich energy controversy, to be specific. So this all started back between 2018 2019. Rich Energy company, nobody knows who they are. Nobody's really heard of them. But out of nowhere, it's announced that they're going to be the main title sponsor of the Haas team at the end of the 2018 season going into 2019. Okay, cool. Now they're the sponsor. Now they got the black and gold car. Preseason testing is starting. During preseason testing, people aren't just going for the fastest lap possible. It isn't qualifying, it's testing. So there's a lot of variables and there's a lot of things going on in testing. But Haas did technically beat Red Bull. The owner of Rich Energy, William Story, he was very hyped about that because his energy drink thing beating the other energy drink thing, that's pretty cool. As the season starts playing out, Haas obviously wasn't really competing with Red Bull in the slightest for most of the entire season, if not literally the entire season. William Story, not very happy about that. He starts getting on Twitter, and during the season, tweets were pretty funny. It's kind of hard to hate on them too. Some of them I got a little bit of a chuckle out of. One day, out of nowhere, from the Rich Energy Twitter, they announced that they are going to be terminating their contract with the Haas F1 team for underperformance. But then it almost immediately comes out after that this was the statement of a rogue individual, and does not reflect what the company and the shareholders wanted. And then William Story, the owner and the guy who put that statement out, then announced that their company was trying to mount a coup against Story. You know, this is getting kind of silly. This is getting kind of weird. I think pretty quickly after, Haas then cancels the Rich Energy contract, but then they keep the wrap on the car, which I don't know if there was some sort of legal or contractual obligation on why they did that, but they did keep rocking the Rich Energy car throughout the rest of the year, which I thought was kind of funny too. And now, after all of that happened, Rich Energy is just kind of, it's gotten forgotten about, really. I mean, I've never seen a can of Rich Energy. Apparently they're a British energy drink company, so maybe they're only in Britain, maybe some other parts of Europe and not in America. But at the end of the day, that's really all there is to the Rich Energy Haas controversy, really. It's not too much else to that one. Next, we are talking about the Canada 2019 controversy. It's lap 48. Sebastian Vettel's leading the race. Lewis Hamilton's kind of behind him. Vettel, he goes in for a turn, but his tires aren't hot enough. He doesn't have the optimum grip. He kind of loses the back end a little bit. He goes off into the grass. He kind of comes back on track a little bit. The Lewis Hamilton was right behind him, ready to take the lead. Vettel went kind of wide, coming back on the track, which he was kind of forced to. He didn't really have many options, but that led Lewis Hamilton to have to back off a little bit, and the Mercedes team went jibber-jabbering to the FIA, and they were able to get Sebastian Vettel a 5-second time penalty for coming back onto the track in an unsafe manner. Lewis Hamilton just had to stay behind him within 5 seconds, really, for the rest of the race, and Sebastian Vettel obviously made it to the checkered flag first, or the line, but Lewis Hamilton was within the 5 seconds, so he technically won the race and got the points. Ferrari and Vettel were very upset, obviously. They thought it was a pretty harsh ruling on the rules. If not, the rules really shouldn't have been enforced, and it should have just been looked at as a racing incident. But the Mercedes team, they got their way. They were able to fight for that to happen, and they got what they wanted, and Lewis Hamilton won the race. And he even said himself he wasn't the best way to win a race, but he won the race, he got the points, and yeah, you got the championship that year. That's kind of all there is to it, really. There's not a whole lot to that controversy, I guess. Pretty quick, simple one.
Ferrari will be
Watch the time, 121.07. Heinz Harald Frentzen. No! Oh my! Oh my!
Next, we are going to be going into the 1997 Jerez controversy. This one isn't too crazy in depth. Just a fun race weekend, really. You had Jacques Villeneuve, Michael Schumacher fighting for the driver's title very tightly that entire year. They're coming into the Jerez race. It's the last race of the year, and Michael Schumacher has a 1-point lead over Villeneuve. So this is a big race. With it being the last race, they obviously have to go for everything here. First, we'll start off with the qualifying session. Nothing too much to cover, other than the fact that Jacques Villeneuve, Michael Schumacher, and Heinz Harald Frentzen all set identical times down to the 1,000th of a second at a 121.072, which is pretty wild. Probably never gonna happen again. But because Jacques got to the line first in the qualifying session, he technically got to start on pole, followed behind Michael Schumacher. So we go into the race. The race gets off. Michael Schumacher is able to take the lead right off the line. He gets a little bit of a better start. And they're doing the race thing. Jacques, he's right behind Michael Schumacher. He knows that this has to be the lap. If he makes a move, this is going to be it. And coming into one of the turns, he's right behind him. He knows this is the turn. So he goes for it. He cuts off at the last second, goes in on the inside of the turn. Michael Schumacher, not exactly realizing that this move was being made on him until it was too late, also goes in for the turn, but he hits Jacques. Jacques, his car only gets hit in the left radiator pod, which is just the side of the car, pretty much, so he was able to drive off fine. But Michael Schumacher hit his car with the wheel, so he was taken out of the race. He had to retire his car. On that retirement, Jacques won the driver's title. He just had to bring the car home, get in the points, get at least 1 or 2 or something like that, and he was going to win. And he did. He got 3rd place in the race. He didn't want to fight for 1st place really because that wasn't the priority, obviously. But he was able to win that year, and he was able to put himself in the history books forever. And I imagine he's probably pretty happy about that. Michael Schumacher probably wanted another title though, so that's how it be. That's just a part of history, and that's all she wrote, really.
See them. Here we go. Oh my god, the Mercedes has taken off.
One of the last items on the list, if not the last item on the list, we are going to be talking about the Mercedes wheel rims controversy. This happened back in 2018, pretty much. It was noticed that Mercedes had changed the design on their rims of their cars a little bit. People thought, that's kind of weird. But the FIA came in and they said that they are totally legal and they're not a problem. People were potentially going to protest that and protest the rims overall, saying that they resembled the Red Bull's blown axle concept that was banned back in 2012. But it never got banned because the Red Bull part technically had movable aerodynamic parts, and this Mercedes rim does not have movable aerodynamic parts, which are against the rules. So it seemed that this rim was fine. It seemed just everybody was a little butthurt because Mercedes was getting that little extra cooling out of the rims. That's really all this was for. They're putting a couple extra holes in it, really, so the tires breathe a little better and they just get that, a little bit better temperature control or whatever. So, it's the pinnacle of motorsport. Teams are going to try to innovate new ways to get maximum performance out of their cars. That's really what we saw here. So, yeah, to my knowledge, the tech and the ideas never got banned. Yeah, Mercedes just has slightly cooler tires, I guess now. So good for them. They can race that tiny bit harder, and that's all they really wanted and needed, I guess. So good for them, I guess. Okay, and that does it for the Formula One iceberg of controversies and conspiracies. I really hope you did enjoy this video. If you did enjoy the video, if you could drop it a little like, I would very greatly appreciate it. And if you want to see part 2, and if you want to see other videos from me, drop a sub, because we do have more stuff coming. And yeah, I'm just ready to make part 2. So we're going to get to part 2 as soon as we can. We might have another couple videos coming out in between that too. But yeah, stay tuned, stay excited. Part 2's coming out soon.